See what it's like coming to Egypt on a 12-day group tour with me as your personal guide. See the food that we ate, the places that we visited, and most importantly, the beautiful yacht that I privately chartered for our 5 nights moving down the Nile River. If you'd like to come to Egypt on a group tour, check out upcoming tours on my website, egyptadventurestravel.com, and click on the group tours tab. I'd love to take you to Egypt with me. The first day of the Essential Egypt tour, I let my guests sleep in and get over the jet lag, and then we went to Coptic Cairo to visit Christian churches. We went to the Cavern Church, the Church of St. Barbara, the Church of St. George, and we finished our visit at Coptic Cairo by going to the most celebrated church there, the Hanging Church. This church is built on the remains of a Roman fortress. After we finished taking in the Coptic Orthodox Christian history, we went to see some Islamic history at Muez Street and the Khana Khalili Souk. We saw lots of different mosques and Islamic buildings. We had a chance to walk through the hustle and bustle of the market, and then we stopped for dinner at my favorite rooftop restaurant. After dinner, we finished up shopping at the market, saw the Islamic monuments lit up beautifully in the night, and then went back to the hotel to get some sleep because we're heading to the pyramids the next day. Day 2 of the Essential Egypt tour was at Giza. We went inside of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, saw the Pyramid of Khafren, and also saw the Pyramid of Menkaure. After taking in all of these pyramids, it was time for us to head to the panoramic area to ride camels, and then go to lunch at the 9 Pyramids Lounge. We had a Thanksgiving Day feast with this as our backdrop. Then after lunch, it was time to check out the Sphinx up close and personal. This is one of my favorite parts of the Giza Plateau. After we took in the Sphinx and took a few more group pictures, it was time to head out to the Grand Egyptian Museum. The Grand Egyptian Museum is not fully open, but we were able to get inside and see the limited amount of objects on display, like this colossal statue of Ramses the Great, and shop at, in my opinion, what is one of the best gift shops now in Egypt. After the gem, we went back to the hotel for dinner and resting up before tomorrow. The third day of the Essential Egypt tour started out at the Saqqara Step Pyramid, which actually is older than the pyramids at Giza. And then we got a chance to go in another pyramid in Saqqara to see the hieroglyphic texts that are in the burial chamber. After that, we checked out some old kingdom tombs, and then we left Saqqara and headed to Dashur, where we saw the Red Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid up close. Both of these pyramids you can go inside, and some of my guests opted to go all the way down into the Bent Pyramid and back out. I sat that one out though. Then after we finished at Dashur, we went through the countryside to our last stop of the day, the ancient capital of Memphis, which has a colossal statue of Ramses the Great and lots of other artifacts spread out throughout the site. We headed back to the hotel after a lunch in the countryside because we have a really early morning tomorrow when we fly to Luxor. After an early morning flight, we arrived to Luxor, where we went straight to Karnak Temple, the largest ancient Egyptian temple. We saw the massive pillars at the hypostyle hall, and then it was time to check into our Dahabiya yacht called Kemet, which will be our home for 5 nights during our Nile cruise. There are 3 different types of suites on our boat, and it is gorgeous. After lunch, we went to Luxor Temple, and we got there right before sunset. So we got to take in the temple at sunset, and then we got to see it lit up majestically in the dark. After the temple, we went back to our boat to have a delicious dinner and dessert, and then some guests wanted to try shisha, so I took them to the Steigenberger Nile Palace where we had shisha along the Nile River. We couldn't stay out late though because we have a 4:15 a.m. wake-up call for our hot air balloon ride in the morning. Our second day in Luxor started with a sunrise hot air balloon ride over the West Bank. Then we went back to our boat for breakfast before starting our visits for the day. We began at the Valley of the Kings, where we saw 3 tombs for 3 different New Kingdom pharaohs, and we finished up by going into King Tut's tomb. Then we went to Hatshepsut's temple, and we also saw the Colossi of Memnon, before we went to Nefertari's tomb, the best preserved tomb that you can visit in Luxor.
Oh my God.
After taking in all of these sites, it was time to head back to our boat, have some lunch, and rest up. Lunch today was kosheri, an Egyptian staple. And then we had a sunset performance from a local music group. And they also joined us at dinner where we had this delicious meal with some more live music setting the mood. This morning we went through the Isna Lock where we raised up about 7 meters before continuing our journey south on the Nile. The morning was all about relaxation, reading a book, getting some work done, and enjoying the views of the river, followed by lunch. Then after we ate, we headed to Idfu Temple, our only stop of the day, the best preserved ancient Egyptian temple, full of lots of beautiful reliefs. After we were done exploring Idfu Temple, we went back to Kemet, where it was time to enjoy a glass of wine while we continued our journey south toward Kom Ombo. My favorite part of the trip is always relaxing on the Dahabiya Nile Cruise and slowing down, taking in the beautiful views. We even saw a full moon tonight before it was time to have a delicious dinner of tilapia from the Nile, followed by dessert. While we enjoyed breakfast on our dahabeya, we had the view of Gebel El Silsila, a quarry used in ancient times. Then we went to Kom Ombo Temple straight from the boat. This temple has beautifully preserved remains, and it also has a museum dedicated to the crocodile god Sobek. After we finished up at the temple, we went to an island in the Nile where we got to explore, and then we even had the opportunity to change into our swimsuits and to jump in the river. We had a great time swimming and enjoying the Nile River, and then had another music performance and opportunity to dance before we settled in for a barbecue in the evening on the island and got a good night's sleep because we're going to Abu Simbel Temple early in the morning. After a quick breakfast, we left our dahabeya at 6 a.m. to start the 4-hour drive through Aswan and the desert to Abu Simbel Temple, Ramses the Great's masterpiece. This temple was picked up piece by piece and moved to save it from the flooding after the opening of the high dam. The Abu Simbel Temple complex has beautiful reliefs like this one you see here. And in addition to the temple of Ramses the Great, there's a smaller temple dedicated to his wife Nefertari. We saw these two temples and had plenty of free time to roam around taking pictures and videos of the beautiful, beautiful scenes. And then it was time to head back to our dahabeya boat where we saw a gorgeous sunset before settling in, enjoying our last meals of what will be an unforgettable experience, 5 nights and 6 days on the Nile River. After hanging out with some puppies in the morning, we bid farewell to Kemet Dahabeya and all of the wonderful staff who made our 5-night privately chartered Nile cruise absolutely unforgettable. Then it was time for sightseeing in Aswan. We went to the island of Philae to see the Temple of Isis. This is one of my favorite temples on an island and has lots of kitties to play with. Then we went to see the High Dam of Aswan, and after we took in the High Dam, we had a boat ride over to our lunch stop for the day at Duka Restaurant. This restaurant had great food, and the best part about it was the gorgeous view looking out over the Nile River where we could see felucca boats sailing past. Then we hit up the Aswan Souk for some last-minute shopping before it was time to head to the airport and take our non-stop flight back to Cairo. Then we checked into the Kempinski Cairo Nile and are getting some rest for our day tomorrow. Our last full day in Cairo began at the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. We saw 22 royal mummies and lots of other artifacts from throughout Egypt's history. Then we went to the original Egyptian Museum at Tahrir Square, and we saw the Tutankhamun artifacts that are still on display there, along with hundreds of other ancient Egyptian objects that will never leave this museum, even after the Grand Egyptian Museum fully opens. When we finished up at the Egyptian Museum in Tahrir Square, it was time for some lunch, so we headed to Abu Tariq Koshery and tried Egypt's national dish. This is my favorite place to try koshery. Then it was time for some shopping in Zamalek at Fair Trade Zamalek, along with getting some pastries at Kawaider, and then taking the metro back to our hotel in Garden City. That evening, we went to a local ahwa or coffee shop, and then we hit up a dive bar to try some Egyptian beer, Stella, before turning in for the evening and getting ready for our trip to Alexandria. On our last day of the tour, we drove north from Cairo to Alexandria, Egypt's Mediterranean jewel, and started our visits with the Roman catacombs of Kom Ombo. After we came up from the catacombs, we visited a Roman theater ruins. And after taking in the Roman theater and walking around the site, we saw a Roman villa with beautiful mosaic tile remains. And then we hit up the modern masterpiece of the Library of Alexandria. After seeing the library, we went to an Islamic fortress, the Kite Bay Citadel, right on the Mediterranean Sea, with really breathtaking views of the Mediterranean and the city of Alexandria. After this, it was time for our local seafood feast, where we went to Farag Fish Restaurant and picked out everything we wanted, and then they had it prepared for us in a delicious meal. We drove back to Cairo after this, and it was time for people to start saying goodbyes as we settle in for our last night at the hotel and head to the airport tomorrow.